Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish. Today is Monday, July 15th. Holland Squallen Quist Squamish Ochmeo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our first order of business is, under staff reports, is the Chikai River Development Post-Adoption Council endorsement items. So I'll turn it over to our staff, I believe. Yep, go ahead.
Good morning, council and community members watching and staff. Okay, there's always one. We are pleased this morning as staff to be presenting to you the final elements of the Chikai River development that are required for council consideration. I wanted to remind council and the community why we're here today. So on June 11th, council adopted rezoning of the development application for this area. There are conditions outstanding that need to be considered by council, and if you choose to endorse them, particularly around a provincial indemnification for the financial risk that exists around having this debris flow barrier built and owned by the District of Squamish. Just as a refresher, thanks to Squamish Nation specifically, their staff worked with myself and our CFO, Heather Boxroad, in meeting with the province over a number of months and did enter into negotiations around an indemnification. The Minister of Finance indicated that they would withhold presenting final terms to be considered and negotiated by staff for council consideration until such a time as the development had been rezoned. So they wanted to know that the development was something that council would endorse in advance of the negotiations. There's a license of occupation that will be discussed today, the servicing agreement with the developer, requirement to become the local diking authority, and then consideration of the final term sheet that the province has provided. Those elements are all interdependent, which is why they are before you today, and particularly that the permission to construct is being withheld until such a time as we knew we had the opportunity to have an indemnification from the province. So that was mitigating risk on behalf of the district. So that's our introduction and a reminder as to why we're here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our staff team to present the details.
Morning, Mayor and Council. My name is David Rolston. I'm the Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning, and I'm joined by Rianne Souza, Director of Financial Operations, and also available for questions are Jonas Vilaniskis, Senior Director of Community Planning, and Sarah Bailey, Director of Engineering. So the purpose of today is to present information to Council and to seek Council resolutions on the Provincial Indemnity Agreement, License of Occupation, Servicing Agreement for the Chikai Barrier, and to secure Council agreement to become the local diking authority. Just as a very high-level summary, we want to provide this just in one slide rather than provide a detailed presentation, which was provided on June 11th. So we're here to focus the presentation on new content that's related to the items we're seeking council resolutions on. But at a high level, the Chikai River development application was received in 2013 and received approval of the rezoning and OCP amendment bylaws on June 11th of this year. The development is a 1,215 unit mixed use development in the Ross Road area of Brackendale. And the development is within the Chikai Fan and requires mitigation, which has been determined to be optimally provided by a debris flow barrier at the apex of the Chikai Fan. This slide was presented at the public hearing and the rezoning adoption meeting. So it laid out that while rezoning was adopted, further items would require council endorsement, prior to any development of the site or beginning construction of the barrier. And that was to allow for council to resolve outstanding issues related to the Chikai debris flow barrier. So that included receiving council endorsement of a provincial indemnification agreement that would help cover the costs of debris cleanout behind the barrier, receiving council authorization to execute a license of occupation for use of Crown lands for the purpose of constructing and operating the Chikai barrier, receiving council authorization to execute a servicing agreement for the barrier that specifies obligations by the developer to construct the barrier on the district's behalf, and council's decision to become the local dikening authority. So we are now at the post council or post adoption meeting to receive council authorization for those items. So the license of occupation provides Crown land tenure to the district for the purpose of constructing and operating the Chikai barrier. The area is shown on the screen here, and that's some of that is permanent and some of that is temporary for the purpose of constructing the barrier. The license of occupation specifies the district's obligations to the province during construction and operation phase. So that our obligations are to comply with a management plan that specifies all of the different land use activities throughout the course of the project. It obligates the district to comply with applicable laws, permits, and regulations. And in the event of a default during construction, it would obligate the district to restore the site to a safe, clean, and sanitary condition. There's also a specific condition within the license of occupation that a $5 million security deposit must be provided in order to secure those obligations. Once construction is complete, the license gets converted to a statutory right-of-way in favor of the District of Squamish. So this is servicing agreements are quite common for developments that are building municipal infrastructure that ultimately is handed over to the district. This is quite a unique servicing agreement based on the size of the project and also just the configuration of having a developer constructing on Crown land on the district's behalf. So the servicing agreement specifies obligations that the developer will have to the district to ensure that that we can fulfill our obligations to the province. Some of the terms within the servicing agreement include SSSD's obligations during construction. It specifies project milestones, so things like permission to construct, substantial performance, and final acceptance of the barrier. Project timelines like the warranty and maintenance period, the term of the agreement, financial elements, including capacity funding and a security deposit, as well as risk mitigation items. So insurance, provisions for force majeure, as well as major hydrologic and geophysical events, or in other words, debris flows or earthquakes during construction. And I'll go into more detail about what some of those obligations and provisions are. So again, a typical servicing agreement would cover municipal infrastructure, things like roadworks, water mains, sewers, and drainage infrastructure. In this case, we're covering the debris flow barrier, which has an estimated construction cost of $89 million. Under typical developments, once the district enters into a servicing agreement with the developer, then building permits are issued. And at the same time, the district collects enough security to complete the works ourselves in case a developer defaults. In this case, issuance of building permits is being delayed to substantial performance because it's not feasible to provide a security deposit of enough value to complete construction. And typically, occupancy permits would be issued upon reaching substantial performance of the works. And in this case, it's being delayed until the barrier is fully complete. And that's to ensure that the development can be safe for the intended use prior to having any occupancy. And I'll note as well that there will be other servicing agreements for municipal infrastructure that will be required to service the development. So this one, we're just discussing the Chikai Barrier Services Agreement today. So permission to construct, typically the requirements are the developer has to provide approved construction plans, certificates of insurance, pay administration fees, provide a security deposit, and have a signed servicing agreement. Those are all present in the Chikai Barrier Services Agreement, but we also have some additional requirements, including having an executed land development agreement, performance bond to secure performance of the work, having executed permits, so provincial and federal permits, which there are quite a few for this project, having a capacity funding agreement that will cover district costs during the construction phase, as well as collecting $1 million in seed funding. This is a requirement of the provincial indemnity agreement that Ms. Souza will speak to later, as well as collecting $1.5 million for amenity cost charges, which is specified in the land development agreement. Under normal, typical servicing agreements, there are a number of requirements to reach substantial performance. And again, that's the stage at which we will be issuing building permits. And normally the value of works needs to be, remaining works needs to be less than 3% of the first 500,000, 2% of the next 500,000, and 1% of the balance. So for an $89 million project, the value of works would need to be remaining works would be less than 905,000. That's been modified for the barrier services agreement so that the value needs to be less than $3.9 million. And that's based on an engineer of record specifying what works can remain outstanding while still having completion or substantial performance of the barrier. Final acceptance is typically upon expiration of a 1-year warranty and maintenance period, and making sure that any outstanding deficiencies have been remediated. That's been modified for the barrier services agreement because we have extended the warranty and maintenance period to 2 years, and withholding occupancy for 2 years would be a hardship for the developer and also wouldn't really serve any practical purpose. So final acceptance in this agreement would be when the engineer of record certifies that the works are complete, that all permit conditions have been met, the district receives a final completion report. It's been confirmed that debris behind the barrier is below acceptable levels, which is specified in the operations and maintenance agreement, and the district collects the remaining $4 million in seed funding for the reserve. So that would be for a total of $5 million. And again, as specified in the provincial indemnity agreement. So the warranty and maintenance period typically is 1 year. In this case, given the size of construction and the complexity, that's been extended to 2 years to allow just greater time for any issues that could arise to come up. So the scope of work covered by the agreement, it provides an increased timeline. Typically, a servicing agreement has a 1-year term. In this case, construction is expected to take 2 or more years. And so a period of 5 years has been provided, which also includes the construction period and the warranty and maintenance period. And that's subject to extension if there's a force majeure, also called an act of God, or a major debris flow or earthquake during the construction phase. So moving into financial items, for a typical servicing agreement, there is a percentage that is specified in our fees and charges bylaw. So for an $89 million project, that would amount to $3.3 million. Given the value of this project and kind of the practical, what the district actually requires, that's been modified. So we have a draft capacity funding agreement that would pay for a full-time engineer and also allow for third-party costs, such as engaging with consulting engineers or legal for any specialized advice. And the total cost of the covered under the capacity agreement is $1.55 million over a 5-year period. This typical security deposit is 120% of the construction cost estimate. So For an $89 million project, that would be close to $107 million, which through discussions with the developer is just not deemed to be feasible. So that has been reduced to 10% of the construction cost estimate, or $8.9 million. And since we aren't collecting enough money to complete construction of the barrier, that's why we have modified the issuance of building permits. So we've delayed that to substantial performance, at which point in time we will have enough security to complete construction with our security deposit, and all to ensure that we're not issuing building permits for buildings that couldn't ultimately be occupied. So this approach provides the district with the necessary protections. In terms of insurance, typically we have $2 million for engineering professional liability insurance, and the developer needs to carry $5 million in comprehensive liability insurance. We have engaged with Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, and they've provided us with recommendations for a comprehensive suite of insurance that I won't go into, but it's listed here. And ultimately, this provides the district with all of the necessary protections throughout the construction and warranty and maintenance periods. Force majeure or act of God. So this is events that could impact the construction of the barrier that the developer has no control over. So the definition has been expanded to include reference to major weather events, things like tornadoes and hurricanes and these extreme unforeseen elements. And essentially what is covered with force majeure is allowing for extension of the servicing agreement for the additional time that it might take to resume construction. We have broken out the definition of a major hydrologic and geophysical event. So the developer is fully responsible for the impacts that a debris flow or an earthquake could have on construction. And that provides the district with assurance that will be provided a debris flow barrier that is clear of debris upon completion and not damaged due to an earthquake or debris flow during the construction period. With that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Souza for the provincial indemnity agreement.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Souza, Director of Financial Operations at the District, and I'll be walking through the financial implications of the term sheet. At the June 11th, 2024 Council meeting, the District presented the general financial terms that it was seeking the provincial indemnity for. Immediately following the Council meeting, Ministry of Finance staff provided a draft term sheet based on the months of negotiation that had occurred. The CAO and CFO of the District met with provincial staff twice more to negotiate the terms, after which the province provided a final term sheet, and I will walk through a comparison of the financial terms that the District presented at the June 11th Council meeting and the final term sheet provided by the province. The operations and maintenance funding model submitted by SSSD as a condition of rezoning is in 2022 dollars. We recognize that there are cost escalations since this date. However, for the purposes of consistency with the data, all costs and taxation impacts are in 2022 dollars. To assist with the community's understanding of the financial implications of the term sheet, I'd like to, next slide, please. Thanks. I'd like to first review the three reserves that I'll be referring to. First, the operations and maintenance reserve. This reserve will be utilized to fund operation and maintenance expenditures. The second is the provincially restricted reserve. The reserve will be utilized to fund post-event restoration costs, including post-event capital expenditures. The third is the capital reserve. This reserve will be utilized to fund expenditures that are not eligible to be funded by provincial or the provincially restricted reserve or not indemnified by the province. Next slide. First, I'll review regular operations and maintenance. The district proposed that it would assume the regular operations and maintenance costs, which are estimated to be $540,000 annually. Further, the district proposed it will place surplus operation and maintenance funds into a separate reserve to be utilized for operations and maintenance costs in years that may exceed $540,000. The province accepted these terms. There is no change to the risk from what was presented at the June 11th council meeting. The risk to the district is that the annual operation and maintenance costs are greater than the anticipated costs, and the operations and maintenance reserve is not built to a level it can fund these expenditures. In this case, the district will need to increase local area service taxation and our general taxation to cover these costs. The district proposed that it contribute $300,000 annually to a reserve to be utilized to fund all capital repairs and post-event restoration costs, and that the provincial indemnification fund costs in excess of the reserve. The province did not accept these terms. The term sheet requires the $300,000 annual district contribution and allows the district to access the reserve for post-event restoration costs and capital expenditures as a result of an event. However, the reserve cannot be used to fund planned capital repairs, and the provincial indemnity is limited to capital repairs for beams that are designed to sustain damage in an event. The operations and maintenance model submitted by SSSD estimates the planned capital repairs to be $21,700,000 over a 100-year time period. The district will need to fund these costs through local area service taxation and or general taxation. The post-event restoration capital costs that the district will need to fund from local area service taxation and or general taxation, should they exceed the provincially restricted reserve and are not eligible for indemnity, range from $230,000 to $3.1 million per debris flow event. Next slide. Continuing with capital repairs and post-event restoration, to mitigate the impact of capital repair costs that are ineligible for indemnification, the district can set up a separate capital reserve to proactively save for these costs. In circumstances that the capital repairs that are unrelated to a debris flow event or ineligible for indemnity exceed the district's reserves, the district may have the option to debt finance the capital repairs, which will spread the costs over a time period. However, the district is statutorily limited to a 25% debt servicing limit, and the district's current long-term capital plan already has pressure on the debt servicing limit. The addition of financial requirements associated with the barrier will exacerbate this existing issue and the availability of debt financing, and therefore is not guaranteed. The province has indicated the operations and maintenance reserve can be utilized for all capital repairs, including those that are ineligible for provincial indemnity. Since contributions to the operations and maintenance reserve are only the result of years in which annual operations and maintenance costs are less than the predicted $540,000, this cannot be relied upon as a stable source to fund capital repairs. Staff recommend that the district plan for capital repairs that are ineligible for provincial indemnification. They can be categorized into first, planned capital repairs, and second, post-event capital repairs. The operations and maintenance funding model estimates planned capital repairs to be $21,700,000 over a 100-year time period. If actual capital repairs are aligned with the assumptions in the operations and maintenance funding model, an annual contribution of $217,000 to a capital reserve is estimated to be adequate. Post-event capital repairs range from $230,000 to $3.1 million per debris flow event. The taxation impacts of moving forward with a provincial indemnification agreement are represented in this slide. The estimated low-range annual taxation impacts of proceeding with the provincial indemnification agreement totals $1,068,500. This equates to an average per unit local area service tax of $0 to $930 per year, and a general taxation increase of $0 to $1,068,500, which is a 0% to 2.5% increase, which will depend on the shared split. The estimated high-range annual taxation impacts of proceeding with the provincial indemnification agreement total $1,336,000. This equates to an on average per unit local area service tax of $0 to $1,200 per year, and a general taxation increase of $0 to $1,366,000, which is a 0% to 3.19% increase, which will depend on the shared split. Next, I'll review the duration of the provincial indemnity. The district proposed that the provincial indemnification have no expiration date. The province did not accept this term. The term sheet states at least 6 months prior to the expiry of the indemnity agreement term, the parties will review matters related to the debris barrier, including the current known risks, cost estimates, potential alternative financing solutions, including but not limited to parametric, reinsurance, and other insurance options, and any other related matters, with the advice and reports from qualified professionals, and enter into good faith negotiations about the potential of an extension of the indemnity at the province's sole discretion. The province has indicated that its rationale for a 20-year term is so that it does not fetter future provincial governments and has the ability to renegotiate when the context may be different, for example, utilizing other financial mitigation products that are currently not available. The risks of a provincial indemnity agreement that expires in 20 years is that the province may not renew the indemnity agreement, and therefore the district would assume all costs of ownership, which includes regular operations and maintenance, capital repairs, and post-event restoration costs. Should the provincial indemnification not extend beyond a 20-year period, all costs are the district's. The costs will need to be funded by district local area service taxation and our general taxation. The costs that the district will bear are regular operations and maintenance, planned capital repairs, post-event capital repairs, and post-event debris removal costs. Regular operations and maintenance and planned capital repairs are at the cost of the district with and without the provincial indemnity agreement and have been reviewed in previous slides. The change to the district as the provincial indemnity agreement is not renewed are the post-event capital repair costs, and the post-event debris removal costs will need to be funded by district local area service taxation and or general taxation. If the province does not renew the indemnity agreement, the post-event debris removal that will need to be funded by district local area service taxation and or general taxation are represented in this slide. Debris flow events are classified by volume class, which predicts the volume of debris flow that would occur for a specified range of return periods. When the debris barrier fills to a specified volume, the Operations and Maintenance Manual recommends the debris be cleaned out to reduce costs of sediment management and maintain tolerable risk levels. The Operations and Maintenance Manual details the costs associated with debris flow removal are in the range of $20 to $38 per cubic meter. The table in the slide represents the probability that an event or a greater event will occur every 10 years. For example, the probability that a volume class 1 or larger event will occur within a 10-year time frame is 63%, which is estimated to have a post-event restoration cost of $990,000 to $1.9 million. Whereas the probability that a volume class 6 event will occur within a 10-year time frame is 0.3%, which is estimated to have a post-event restoration cost of $53.2 million to $101 million. To note, these are not one-time costs, they are costs per debris flow event. Continuing on with the post-event debris removal without provincial indemnity, this slide represents the taxation impact of each volume class within a $20 to $38 per cubic meter cost. At a $20 per cubic meter cost for debris removal, A volume class 1 event has an estimated taxation impact of $990,000, which equates to a 2.3% general taxation increase. Whereas a volume class 6 event has an estimated taxation impact of $53.2 million, which equates to a 124% general taxation increase. At a $38 per cubic meter cost for debris removal, a volume class 1 event has an estimated taxation impact of $1.9 million, which equates to a 4.4% general taxation increase. Whereas a volume class 6 event has an estimated taxation impact of $101 million, which equates to a 236% general tax increase. Again, these costs and taxation impacts are per debris flow event. If the province does not renew the indemnity agreement, the post-event capital repair costs will need to be funded by the district taxation, are represented on this slide. A volume class 1 event has an estimated taxation impact of $290,000, which equates to a 0.7% general taxation increase. Whereas a volume class 6 event has an estimated taxation impact of $6 million, which equates to a 13.9% general taxation increase. These costs and taxation impacts are per debris flow event. Prior to moving into Mr. Rolston's presentation, we did miss Ms. Glenday's introduction of the indemnity agreement. Did you want to speak to it at this point? Okay.
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you very much, Ms. Souza, for the great detail around the indemnification agreement. I appreciate it. I did want to provide council with some, and the community with some more context around the process that got us to this final term sheet with the province. So at the very beginning, probably actually at the end of 2023, when this file was escalated to me and Ms. Boxroot, our CFO, we were staring down the costs that you've seen presented. Actually, this works better that I can now point to those without any financial backstop other than taxation, which, as you can see from the numbers, are rather extreme and challenging for a council to take on behalf of the community. And I would again like to thank the Squamish Nation, particularly their staff, who worked with us and the developer in terms of meeting and coming up with ideas. And it was the Squamish Nation that staff brought the idea of working government to government to government. So at that point, in Q1 of this year, myself and Ms. Boxroot, Squamish Nation staff, met with staff from the province, from the Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation branch, to come up with a proposal for the Ministry of Finance to consider to indemnify post-event restoration costs that were beyond what the district could reasonably, we thought as staff, could consider as council. So once that process started, it then became between the province and the District of Squamish, of course, and that's when Ms. Boxroot and I worked with provincial staff from JEDI as well as Ministry of Finance back and forth on terms that were important to us in terms of indemnification. And then, as you saw with the letter from the Minister of Finance, eventually they came through and said, yes, they would commit to a limited indemnification agreement once council, of course, rezoned. And then the final term sheet that we received the day after adoption, we went back and forth with in terms of clarifying terms, and a specific email from the ADM of the Minister of Finance that this is a serious intent from the province to finalize a formal legal agreement to indemnify these costs now, or these potential costs. As we said, it is a limited indemnity. I do believe it's an exceptional indemnification that the province is providing. That's what's been indicated to us from staff in any event. But nonetheless, as you saw from Ms. Souza's presentation, there still exists risk that council needs to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we going back over here? Okay, take it away, Mr. Rolston.
Thank you. So on to the final item for today. Basically, the province requires that a local diking authority or a local government accepts responsibility as a local diking authority prior to providing a Dike Maintenance Act approval. And so in accepting that role, the district would become the owner and responsible for all operations and maintenance responsibilities and associated costs. So one of the recommendations today is to seek council's agreement that the District of Squamish agrees to become the local diking authority for the barrier. So in summary, there are some significant benefits of the proposal in front of us. The barrier would be constructed with capital costs funded by the developer, Squamish Sea to Sky Developments. There is a provincial indemnity agreement that will assist the district with debris, significant post-event debris flow cleanout costs. The proposal also includes the ability for the district to set up a local area service tax that will assist with covering operations and maintenance costs. Existing life loss and financial risk are being mitigated through construction of the debris flow barrier. And through the construction of the barrier, it also enables the potential for increased housing as well as commercial development that's contained within the Chikai River development. There are risks to consider as well. So some of those, the main risks that staff would like to highlight for council consideration are that the security deposit is not adequate to complete construction of the barrier. So in the event of a default, the amount of security that's being collected would allow the district to restore the site to a safe, clean, and sanitary condition, but not complete construction of the barrier. Staff have mitigated that risk through the approach that was outlined in the servicing agreement, which is to delay issuance of building permits until the barrier has reached a stage of substantial performance. And the security deposit is sufficient to allow the district to complete obligations within the license of occupation, which is notably restoring the site to a safe, clean, and sanitary condition. During the ownership phase, the indemnity agreement has a 20-year term, so there is longer term uncertainty that council should consider. There's also the risk that costs of ownership are higher than estimated. The operations and maintenance funding model that we have at this point are estimates, and so there is always the potential that those costs could be higher. And then there's also the potential for barrier failure due to unforeseen or low probability events. Those are specified in the detailed design report, and there are some very extreme events. So things like having a major debris flow followed by a significant earthquake. And so they're very low probability events, but they do exist that could result in significant damage or destruction of the barrier that would not be covered by the indemnity agreement. So with that, we'll move to the recommendations, which I won't read out, but related to the 4 items that were discussed today. I'll hand it over to council for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much for the presentation and all your work on this file. Council, questions? Councilor French?
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation and all the great work that's being done on this. In reading through the staff report, there was one aspect that really jumped out at me. Provincial alternative risk financing solutions, including but not limited to parametric, reinsurance, and other insurance options. And the report talks about insurance products that don't exist now but could potentially exist into the future. And I think I'm interpreting that correctly out of the staff report. So I'm wondering if staff could give us a little more context around what is parametric and what about these potential future insurance options that don't exist today?
Thank you. Through the chair, Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial Information Technology and Procurement Services, and CFO. So parametric insurance is a product that is when the risk has been established and is known, and that there is a certain amount of funding put aside, that it's almost like a tiered insurance product. That's not something that exists for the district at this moment, but could potentially exist in the future. As I understood it, the province is leaving the indemnification open to that in the future, because there could be other options and products that are available at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill, then Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. A few questions. And the first one, just to understand the bounds of sort of worst case versus best case. But let's say we get to a worst case in 20 years, the province doesn't want to indemnify, community decides we can't afford it. Does the land, everyone just sort of keeps living there at their own risk, or it becomes unoccupiable and we have to move everyone out, or what would sort of happen in the worst case? Or do we know?
Through the chair, in accepting the role as the local diking authority, it obligates the district to ensure that the barrier can be owned and maintained. So it's not considered as an option to abandon it. It's essentially a liability that the district takes on.
Okay, thank you. My next question then, just trying to understand the difference between the operations and maintenance versus the capital reserve. I guess I'm assuming, there are events of different magnitude kind of all the time. Mostly they're smaller. And so I would understand that to be operations and maintenance. But there's like a per event in the volume class tables, there's a per event capital cost, which sort of blurs the line to me to operations and maintenance, especially for smaller events. Like I would sort of intuitively expect the capital reserve to, we're putting a few $100,000 a year, but we only actually spend that every 10 years to do kind of a major sort of upkeep. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to the distinction between those two funds there.
Thanks for the question. So when we're referring to capital repairs, it's structural damage to the barrier, which, from aligning this with accounting standards and how we treat capital, how we consistently treat the capital at the district, is those repairs we would be looking to the capital reserve to be funding. The province has indicated that the operations and maintenance reserve could be used for capital repairs. However, that's only when we've exceeded 540,000 a year that we'd be able to access it.
Just for clarity though, like in general, we would expect that although we have this 200 or per event sort of capital number for accounting purposes, in reality, we're spending sort of a lump sum, say every 10 years to do kind of a major capital refresh or whatever you want to call it. Is that accurate?
Yes, correct. We would be following the operations and maintenance manual for maintenance, which is what is the 21.7 million over the 100 years, and just leave that open in terms of maintenance of the barrier to David Ralston, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, just add that the 21.7 is, you could consider that like an asset management cost. And then in a major debris flow event, there would be some damage expected to the barriers. So things like, concrete damage, the steel beams that are within the outlet slot are expected to be damaged during major debris flow events. And if it's major enough, it could require replacement of those beams. There are certain activities that would be undertaken after any major debris flow event, like inspections, flying LiDAR to determine, the volume of debris flow that came down in an event. So, and the range of those costs will be dependent on the magnitude of the debris flow.
Okay, thanks. And one last one, and then I'll pause. I've got some more after. But so my understanding is that the design of this is to be sort of self-flushing or self-cleaning for smaller events. But I'm not sure where that threshold is in terms of the volume class table. So is everything sort of, anything that's self-cleaning is below volume 1, and once we hit volume 1, it's where we actively have to clean? Or is it like at level 2 to 3, it might actually clean itself? Or do you know where that line is?
Through the chair, the operations and maintenance manual specifies an elevation of debris that is allowed behind the barrier. So it's 289 meters, which is equivalent to about 300,000 cubic meters of debris flow, which is in the range of a volume class 2 event. Self-cleaning will occur regardless of the event, but if debris is above that specified level, then the district would need to come in and accelerate that removal of debris and not just leave it to the river to do that clean out. So there would be kind of external work required to actually physically remove the debris.
So the 540,000 annual operations and maintenance, does that imply then we expect sort of in a typical year to always be above or often be above that 300,000 cubic meter threshold so that we're always having to do active cleaning, or?
Through the chair, the $540,000 is not for debris. It's for staffing costs and other regular maintenance items like maintaining the access roads and completing vegetation management. The $300,000 reserve is allowed to be used for debris clean out. So it's really that separate reserve that would be used for debris clean out, and our regular operations and maintenance reserves would not be used for debris clean out.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. Thanks for all your work on this. It's obviously a very complex problem. I'd like to get a better understanding of where the provincial indemnification sort of kicks in, if you will, and associating it. So in the term sheet, the draft term sheet, it was a single event of greater than 400,000 cubic meters, or accumulation of several small events that led to more than 400,000 cubic meters accumulated, right? And I think that that's on the order of a volume class. That's roughly a volume class 2 event, right? And that's on a return period of 30 to 100 years. So do I understand correctly that the province is effectively indemnifying us against events that we expect to have the 30 to 100 year return period or longer? Is that a reasonable assessment?
Yes, that is a reasonable assessment. Yeah.
Okay. And these, so I have a rough vision of how big 400,000 cubic meters is, but I have no idea how much that covers. How big an event would that be if we didn't have the debris flow barrier in place? Would that come to Highway 99? Would it come to the Chikai-Cheakamus confluence? Like, how far would a volume class 2 event roughly cover? Do we have any idea of that?
Through the chair, we do have an idea of that. We do have, debris flow modeling that that estimates the impacts of a debris flow of that event. There's a lot of uncertainty to debris flow. There's different mobilities if there's a lot of water or if it's not a lot of water mixed in with the debris, and avulsions could occur at different locations. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and the modeling is supposed to be representative, but not supposed to be show the exact impacts that might occur. So it is, those need to be treated with caution that they are modeled events. But generally it would be expected that an event of that volume would reach the confluence. There could be impacts to Highway 99, and there could be impacts to, I think, probably more northern portions of the Chikai Fan in an event of that scale.
Great, thanks very much.
Council, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. We did not win over the province on the issue of the 20-year term that they have put forward, and the potential prospect that it may not be renewed, and other elements of the term sheets with respect to capital repair and post-event costs. Throughout our discussion of this, we have addressed the provincial stake in the Chikai Fan. First of all, right off the top, 2 hydro substations, a highway and a railway. I note in the correspondence that there's 2 ministries referenced, and also from Ms. Glenday, Jobs and Economic Development and Innovation and Finance. But what about MOTI, Energy, BC Hydro? My question is, in your dialogue with the province, are you satisfied that they appreciate, from our point of view, their stake in the risks and what is at stake for them in the Chikai Fan with respect to infrastructure? And the people that have been represented, are you satisfied with these aspects of the dialogue with the province?
I have Ms. Glenday to speak to that.
Thank you, through the mayor. In our conversations with the ministry staff, so it's the risk branch of Ministry of Finance that is particularly briefing up to the minister. And the briefs and information that we sent as staff included the infrastructure that needs protecting, all of which you've just listed, and as well from previous engineering reports, the potential cost to the province if there isn't a debris flow barrier in place, what they would potentially need to indemnify through disaster finance. DFA, Disaster Financial Authority. So to answer your question in short, yes, we are satisfied that the provincial ministries responsible for this indemnification, which is Ministry of Finance through their risk branch, are well aware of all of the infrastructure that this barrier is protecting that's provincially owned.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions. I'll come back to Councillor Pettingill. You have some for a second round. With the talk of the debris removal needs, I know that operating around any body of water is challenging. Are we ready for, is the construction of this really facilitate the removal? And even from a permitting perspective, given that I'm assuming that say 50% of the materials on the far side of the wherever the river decides to be at the end of the channel, like how far down that road are we at this point, so that if something was to occur, it can be remediated quickly? Like, can you speak to that phase of permitting and I guess building in the serviceability into the overall design?
Yes, through the mayor, we have been trying to almost pre-permit. However, I don't think we've been fully successful in that. I think if a major debris flow event occurs, there would be permitting work and work required in order to go and remove debris. In emergency events, there are special provisions. So depending on what the event is, that could be expedited. One element that we've been working on as well is currently the license of occupation covers the footprint of the barrier, but we're seeking to have that expanded to have Crown land tenure within the full basin and within the full area where debris could be deposited and where the district would need to work. So the province has informally agreed to expand that license of occupation, and we'll be going through a process. And we've actually required that prior to final acceptance of the barrier, that we have confirmed that we have the ability to operate within that area. So that would remove one hurdle from having to go into the barrier or the basin and remove debris. But I think in terms of working with DFO, there could be work required following a debris flow to gain necessary permissions.
Okay, thank you. And I was happy to hear you say pre-permit, because I had pre-permitted down here as a question mark, like where are we on that? So I'm confident we're on the same page there. The split between the local area service tax and the general taxation, when and where do we see those discussions happening or starting, I guess?
Through the chair, we have discussed that at length and feel that it is advantageous to the district to wait until we're closer to the date of the barrier being built. And the reason would be we would have final cost estimates and then understand where that percentage split between local area service tax and general taxation would make sense to recommend to council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Pettingill. Oh, sorry. Councillor Greenlaw, the yellow hand blends in with your wallpaper in the back there and I missed it, but go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw. Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, thanks. It's DeWalt yellow is my kitchen. But anyways, yeah, I was just wondering, sorry if I missed this. I was wondering what the design lifespan of the barrier is.
Through the mayor, the lifespan of the barrier itself is considered indefinite. Concrete structure itself should be very long-term. There are elements of the barrier, like the steel beams, the bridge that crosses over top of that have finite lifespan. So those things would need to be repaired, replaced on a more regular frequency, but the actual structure itself is considered to be indefinite.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering in terms of like after 20 years, like how long are we envisioning this project? Like what time span are we thinking of? So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill. Then Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand again? Yeah, okay.
Thanks. My colleague got at part of the question I was going to ask, but I'm trying to understand the relationship between, we're sort of measuring events in cubic meters and then also volume class. So I gather 400,000 cubic meters is about volume class 2. From the indemnification agreement, it goes up to 500,000, which I'm guessing takes us into class 3. But then beyond that, it sounds like we're on our own. And so it seems like there's sort of a narrow window from 400,000 to 500,000 cubic meters of indemnification at the lower rate. So we could be looking at sort of a 50% cost share, kind of worst case, which seems like a very narrow window of indemnification. So what happens like beyond 500,000, or is that an unrealistic scenario for some reason, like some other provincial thing kicks in, or I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Okay, Ms. Glenday is going to run us through that.
Thank you, through the mayor. For clarification, that 500,000 meters cubed, got the right number, refers to a limit of how much debris is removed annually. Because as part of the indemnification, the province wanted to limit annual spending. And rather than put a dollar amount on it, which is hard to ascertain right now in terms of future costs, the province agreed to put a volume limit on it because that's in the O&M manual, what is indicated as likely currently with technology, the limit to which the district or the contractor could get the debris out annually. So it's limited by how much the debris can be removed. The indemnification is unlimited beyond the 400,000 meters cubed volume. So there isn't a limit on how much they indemnify, but they're limiting annual spend by using that volumetric.
So if there's a huge event, so there's 1 million cubic meters, for example, how much in that case would they fund, like $20 per cubic meters till they get us down to just below 400,000, or like what does that mean?
Thanks for the question. We've been in this for so long that we take the detail for granted. So I appreciate you asking these questions. What it means essentially, so if a large event happens that's beyond 400,000 meters cubed, the province will indemnify all costs once the reserve is depleted. So let's say the district has got $20 million in the reserve, 20 million gets spent on removing the debris and any capital repairs as a result. And then costs beyond $20 million until the debris flow is removed and the limited capital is repaired, the beams, the province will pay for. The difference is there is a limit to how much you can remove in a year, and they can amortize their indemnification. So if a large event happens and it takes 5 years to clean out, then their costs are spread out over 5 years, limited to what it costs to take out 500 cubic meters. The $20 per cubic meter is a low threshold, as you know from the report, and the province is just requiring that before they agree to indemnification, that they can look at the costs at that time. So they're not saying they will only spend 20, but they want to have an opportunity to, what's the word? Approve, I suppose, the cost of the day for debris removal.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Olson.
I just wanted to add one additional detail. So the operations and maintenance manual says that when there's a major debris flow event, that a post-event restoration plan would be put together. So essentially, a qualified professional would determine how much debris actually needs to be removed. And so the indemnity agreement would be to cover costs in association with that post-event restoration plan. It would likely specify that debris would be removed down to today's levels to restore the storage capacity of the barrier. And so the indemnity agreement is related to that post-event restoration plan and our operations and maintenance manual.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
There is considerable anticipation around getting construction underway. And it's not only on the part of the developer, but other interests in the community as well. We have some work to do in the Chikai Fan, and we need to take those next steps sooner rather than later. My question really is, once the developer has provided, according to the expectations that you've spelled out for us today, can you speak to the processing time or the turnaround time for a permission to construct application?
Through the mayor, the servicing agreement specifies requirements for permission to construct, including final permits, security deposits. There's quite a litany of items. So a lot of it is actually going to be dependent on the province's turnaround time, but it's not expected to be a significant period of time. A lot of those items have already been secured and provided to the district. So there's some remaining items, likely the Dike Maintenance Act, for instance. So today, if council authorizes execution of the license of occupation, then that will trigger the province to then issue final provincial permits for the Water Sustainability Act and Dike Maintenance Act. And I think those are likely kind of on the critical path schedule-wise to providing to the district to issue a permission to construct. But this is all expected to come together, within a pretty short period of time, 1 or 2 weeks, I would estimate, following execution of the license of occupation.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Next, I have Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Pettingill's question caught some of my questions. An extension of that. So post-event, we take responsibility for cleaning out some, and the province takes responsibility for actually cleaning out more or paying for it. So basically, who does the work? Do we have to organize for the province to do the work, or do we organize for the work to be done in the province and send the bill to the province?
Thank you. Through the mayor, essentially, any event that requires post-event restoration, the district would plan the work. And assuming it's beyond the 400,000 meters cubed, once the reserve is depleted, then the province provides funding, and that is it. Yeah.
Thanks. And this 500,000 cubic meters per year max annual clean out. I just want to know, that's okay. I'm trying to relate it to the annualized volume requiring truck removal from the O&M plan. Okay, I'll go for it. In table 2.2 of the of one of the appendices, sorry, of the O&M plan, gives the annualized sediment volume requiring truck removal. So, and that total annualized volume over all events is 12,000 cubic meters per year. Yeah, which is obviously a number much, much smaller than 500,000. Do I understand correctly that that's because that's how much would need to be removed per year for 1,000 years for one of these 1 in 1,000 year events? Is that why there's such a big difference between the amount that's being proposed to be removed per year and this annualized number from the O&M report?
Through the mayor, yes. So the annualized sediment removal, that was determined so that we could understand what are the long-term sustainable funding levels required to remove debris and maintain the full storage within within the barrier. So that's where it looks at the probability of different return period events occurring. And there will be, many years where nothing occurs or small events occur and the river is able to naturally clean it out. So that's really looking at these larger scale events and the associated frequency, how much debris can be removed naturally by the river and how much requires external intervention to go and remove it. And so when you average that out over a very long period of time, it's estimated that about 12,000 cubic meters per year would be needed to be physically removed from the barrier to maintain its capacity.
But after a major event, we need to remove it much faster than that in order to get the barrier back to a level of suitable protection, right?
That's correct. There would be many years where we don't remove any, and then there would be perhaps a 5-year period of time where we're removing 500,000 cubic meters per year of debris.
Yep, Councillor Pettingill.
Maybe getting into too much detail here, so stop me if I am, but do we know, or is it a certainty that if we have to do removal, we're trucking it out? Like, could we break up the material and just let the river flow it out? Or do we actually have to truck it for sure?
Through the mayor, if there's a very large event that exceeds the 289 meters or 400,000 or 300,000 cubic meters within the barrier, then it will increase risk downstream. And so we'll want to remove debris as quickly as possible and not leave it just to the river. Also, in a major debris flow event, there could be logs and boulders and things that actually block the outlet. So that will require physical intervention to allow the river to also mobilize some of that material. But it wouldn't be enough to just let the river do its work. There will need to be years where debris needs to be physically removed and in order to allow the barrier to function as intended.
Okay. Council, any further questions? We do have a recommendation before us. Councillor Hamilton?
Do these need to be done separately or this is one?
I believe we can do this together. These are all together. We can do either or.
Okay. I'll try all at once.
Okay.
I'll move the staff recommendation that council does points 1 to 4. I don't think we need to read out all 4.
Them out. Okay. I've seconded by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Hamilton?
This debris flow barrier has been a conversation long before my time in Squamish. It's been a conversation for probably closer to longer than my life, I think. And I'm really excited to see this coming forward. It is a big project. There's a lot of risk here for both the developer and for our community moving forward. We take on some financial risk, which we need to be very clear and very sober about the possibility of very significant taxation impacts in the long-term future. But I think that it is something we need to consider, that we need to put in place, that we need to do to protect both our community and to allow the lands in the north of Brackendale to be safely developed. So I'm very supportive of this. And I think the key sticking point that's been over the last few weeks, the provincial indemnification. I want to thank the province for coming to the table. I do understand that they can't do this all the time for every project, but I think this is a sensible way forward for the province to protect us against major events that they would have had to recover from the disaster DFA in any case. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor French as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. And the whole notion of this being a lifelong conversation is definitely resonating with me. I recall back to my teen years going to Brackendale Secondary, which is now Don Ross, and passing by on on Ross Road, an abandoned trailer park for the 3 years that I went to that school, and understanding the history of that abandoned project and the role that this conversation we're having today played in that. So for me, this is as much about protecting development that has been in this area for decades as it is about making way for future much needed housing in Brackendale to serve our entire community. This is a neighborhood that has been exposed to significant natural disaster risk for a long time. And our friends at the Squamish Nation remind us of that whenever they're involved in this conversation. And we've been mindfully moving forward to get us to this place that we're at today. And from what I see and from where I sit, it looks like we'll continue to move mindfully forward as we push this ahead. And by design, there are still safety stop gaps in the unlikely event that we do bump up against some kind of showstopper. In supporting the motion, and I'll also note that a significant amount of good work has been done to get us to this point. Many experts have come together to ensure that the risk, both financial and from a natural hazard perspective, the risk to our community is both manageable and minimal. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, then Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I will support this. There are a few areas of hesitation for me, though, that I do want to call out. The one, just quickly, I'll mention, I do kind of feel like the split between local area service versus general taxation is a discussion that's probably had sooner rather than later. These discussions seem, from my perspective, goes more smoothly when they're a little more abstract. And once you're down to like, sending people the invoice, it gets a lot harder to have those discussions. And so I kind of feel like, a principle, the split in principle is maybe would do us all good to have that discussion sooner rather than later. From the perspective of, as settlers, we've had incredible value and benefit from living on these territories and continue to do so. From that perspective, doing this makes a whole lot of sense. There's only one taxpayer, whether we're paying to the province or municipally or federally. And so from that perspective, it doesn't really matter how we're starting to address, I would say, little pieces of reconciliation, as long as we're doing it. My hesitation is because there's a lot of infrastructure here, what's been talked about, which is provincial, which is of provincial scope. It goes well beyond our community. And so there's a part of me that would like to see the province taking a larger hand and more responsibility here. The other piece of this is that I do feel that both Squamish Nation and the District of Squamish are particularly fortunate communities. And I do worry about pieces of equity and how this gets split across the province and what sort of precedents we're setting. It seems to me that a lot of communities would struggle to do the same thing, and maybe the province will step in a bigger way in those places. But I guess there's a part of me that would just like to sort of understand a sort of more provincial approach to these sorts of things that's fair across the board. But on balance, I think this makes sense. So I want to call those points, and I am happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I will first comment on one of the slides presented by staff, in particular outlining a list of benefits. And I'll quote, enables increased housing commercial development. Of course, that is focused on the Chikai River development, but we need to be mindful that it's bigger than the Chikai River development. This structure could unlock the ability to begin new planning for not only industrial, but tourist commercial uses in the Chikai Fan. This aspect certainly influences my support. One of the engineers, project engineers, spoke at the recent public hearing and about the uniqueness of the project worldwide, and also referred to Swiss examples. Recently in the news, an eastern Swiss Alps debris flow barrier, in fact, quite similar in cost, construction cost to the one we're considering here, has been in the news for two reasons: cost formula, maintenance costs, and also implications of climate change for debris flow risk. And I think it will be of ongoing interest that we follow these other international projects and examples. Finally, I wish to suggest that the decision process, decision points for us will be with us for a while. We still have some more work to do in this file, and I've had opportunity to view the proposed berm site from both sides, from Cat Lake and recently from the Community Forest Harvest Project site, and I'd like to suggest that a council tour would be a good idea with our engineering staff and perhaps project consultants, maybe in the fall. Then council would have opportunity to visualize some of the risk scenarios for berm maintenance and better understand some of the graphs and tables our engineering department has provided to council. And I do think that the public would also appreciate this, such an initiative, a site tour on the part of council as part of our deliberations ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I've got to pull up my, okay. Yeah, I'll also be supporting the motion. I'll echo some of my colleagues' comments, Councillor Pettingill's comments about expediting the conversation around financing. I think that's a really good idea. And echo some comments made by Councillor French and Councillor Hamilton about just the importance of this project. I'm disappointed that the province is not more supportive with their indemnity support. I'm also concerned about the financial burden a project of this magnitude places on a municipality, but I see the necessity of this project and its importance to our community members, in particular our members from the Squamish Nation. I'll also echo Councillor Anderson's request for a council tour because I am a sucker for large-scale engineering projects. So yeah, thanks for all your hard work on this to staff, and yeah, I look forward to moving forward with this.
Thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, I have heard about this risk. I think the entirety of my memory of my life that I remember, at any rate, and the debris flow hazard is one of the most studied in Canada, if not the world, and I think as much as I really appreciate the work that's happened, government to government to government, to get us to this point, given that this has been a topic of discussion since the 70s, I'm really happy that we're here. However, having the province build, maintain, operate this may have been even appropriate at some point on the journey to get us to today. But today we're looking at we found a way forward to have the mitigation measure put in place, operated sort of on a regular basis, and we have some backstopping from the province on the big event. So it makes it supportable for me, but I found the 20-year term quite challenging. I'm going to assume that there's going to be provincial interest in highways and railways and hydro stations longer than this 20-year term, but it's a starting point. So I think that we need to, as an organization, keep our eyes on this piece and find opportunities to continue to advance those conversations in that term going forward. As much as there's a clause in there about needing to initiate negotiations, close to the end of the term, I think this is something that needs to deserves some attention sort of throughout to see how often we can bump that further down the line. In the various pieces, the 4 points that we're executing here and that the presentation spoke to, I appreciate the tables that showed where we deviated from sort of normal formulas, and I think that our and our normal process just is totally appropriate for those normal things. This is not normal, so I'm really happy that we've found creative ways to achieve the outcomes that were really based in our normal process are based on a formula that isn't reasonable to apply to certain things. But I do think that the end goals are achieved through the measures that are laid out in the various pieces. So I think that conversation around the local areas and the general taxation is something that we need to start to get a handle on. And I like having that higher level conversation around it, even just to start familiarizing the community with this conversation that's going to need to we're going to need to get over the line. So that one I think is really interesting and is a piece of this that that isn't resolved with this motion. Also, the item of the council tour that has come up, I'm all for that. We'll figure out a way to do that in appropriate timing for those interested. So, yeah, thank you very much for all the work here. Happy to support, but still lots to do. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. And now I'll be looking for a motion to terminate. Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for the flexibility of being able to be here today.